Imagine waking up, not in your bed, but in a pilot's seat, thousands of feet in the air. The gentle hum of the engine is the only sound, a steady drone against the vast, silent blue of an endless ocean below you. You have no memory of falling asleep, no idea how long you've been unconscious. Could have been a second, could have been days. Your first thought isn't fear, but a wave of shocking relief. You didn't crash. But then, the cold dread begins to creep in as you scan your instruments. The clock on the panel reads 11:30 a.m. You remember taking off at 9:15 a.m.? That's a little over 2 hours. But the airport was 3 hours inland, surrounded by dense Mexican jungle. What body of water could you possibly be over? It's a mathematical impossibility. Then, you see the fuel gauge. It's sitting at 3/4 full. Not only is that impossible after 2 hours of flight, it means you somehow have more fuel than you should. You are in a place you cannot be, with fuel you do not have after a period of time that makes no sense. And as you grip the controls, a chilling realization washes over you. You are a complete stranger inside your own life. Hey friends, you're in Dreamcatcher Stories, your cozy corner for stories that got lost along the way. Hit me up in the comments and tell me how this one hits you. Now, let's get sneaky and peek behind the curtain. Our story begins on a hazy June morning in 1976 at a small, dusty airfield in Chima, Mexico. This was the home base for a 2-3-year-old trainee pilot, a young man full of ambition and quiet confidence named Rafael Perez. Rafael had spent months learning the intricacies of his small Cessna aircraft, but always with an instructor by his side. Today was different. Today was the day he would finally fly solo. The flight plan was deceptively simple. Take off, fly a clean loop around the airfield, and land. It was a final test, a demonstration that he could handle the machine and the pressure all on his own. In 1976, flying was a far more visceral experience. There were no GPS screens, no digital assistants. Pilots relied on their compass, their altimeter, and most importantly, their own eyes. A technique called dead reckoning, which was really just a fancy term for looking out the window and knowing where you were, was a pilot's most trusted tool. At 9:15 a.m. on June 23rd, Rafael's plane lifted off the runway and into the thick, humid air. He had noted the fog on the ground, but once airborne, he realized it was far denser than anticipated. The familiar green landscape below quickly dissolved into a milky white void. He was flying blind, relying entirely on his rudimentary instruments. He made his turn, guessing at the right moment, and began what he believed was his approach back to the airport. But, through the swirling mist, there was nothing. No runway, no familiar landmarks, just an endless sea of white. A knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. He was off course. He was lost. He grabbed his radio, calling back to the control tower to report his situation, but his transmission was met with a burst of garbled static. No response. He checked his compass again, realizing his mistake. He needed to bank hard to the left. He gripped the yoke, the plane's steering wheel, and pulled it firmly to the left. But the plane didn't respond. It just kept flying straight and level at 7,000 feet, as if held by an invisible hand. He tried banking right. Still nothing. The controls were completely useless. A cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He wasn't just lost anymore. He was a prisoner in his own aircraft. He got back on the radio, his voice now laced with panic, explaining that he had lost all control of the plane. As he pleaded for help into the static, something even more terrifying began to happen. The plane, on its own accord, started to climb. He wasn't pulling back on the yoke. He wasn't doing anything. but the nose of the Cessna tilted upward, ascending steadily into a massive, towering cloud bank that loomed ahead like a dark mountain. He was flying straight into a storm, with no control, no visibility, and no contact with the outside world. The world outside his cockpit disappeared entirely, replaced by an oppressive, disorienting gray. It was in this moment of total panic, trapped in a void, that a strange and overwhelming wave of exhaustion washed over him. His eyelids felt like lead weights. His thoughts became slow and syrupy. And then, nothing. He slumped forward in his seat, unconscious. When he came to, it was to the impossible scene over the open ocean. As he frantically tried to make sense of his instruments, his radio crackled to life. A calm, professional voice came through the speaker. "Hey, are you there?" it asked. Raphael lunged for his radio, his voice trembling. Yes, I'm here. I think I fell asleep in my plane. I don't know where I am." There was a long, strange pause on the other end. Then the voice returned, cautiously. "Hey, this is Carlos. Are you alone in your airplane?" The question hung in the air, bizarre and unsettling. "Of course I'm alone," Raphael stammered. "Where am I? What's going on?" Carlos's reply was measured, trying to keep him calm. "Okay, listen. You're just off the coast of Acapulco. For the last hour, you've been flying in circles out over the water. You just kind of showed up. Just follow my instructions. I'm going to bring you in." Raphael, just grateful to be alive, did exactly as he was told. He landed the plane smoothly at the Acapulco airport, but as soon as he stepped onto the tarmac, he was met not by airport staff, but by a group of grim-faced men in dark suits. They immediately detained him, placing him in an unmarked car without a word of explanation. They drove him to a hospital where he was subjected to a battery of tests. He was tested for drugs. The results were negative. A psychologist was brought in to evaluate his mental state. She declared him perfectly sane. All the while, Raphael was bewildered, apologizing for the plane, assuming he was in trouble for his navigational error. Finally, after hours of confusion, the men in suits sat him down in a sterile white room. "We're gonna tell you what happened," one of them said. He explained that at 10:30 that morning, an hour and 15 minutes after Raphael took off from an airport 3 hours away, his plane had simply appeared on the radar screen of Carlos, the air traffic controller. For the next hour, while Raphael was unconscious, Carlos had been talking to his plane, and it was all recorded. They told him that Carlos's first question, "Is there somebody else in the plane?" was because of what he had heard coming through Raphael's radio. They played the tape. At 10:30 a.m., when the unidentified blip appeared on his screen, Carlos had radioed in. "Unidentified aircraft! You are flying over Acapulco's coast!" "Identify yourself." The voice that came back was not Raphael's. It was deep, monotone, and almost robotic. It said, "The pilot is speaking, but not of his own free will. We are using him as a microphone. Your equipment is too primitive. It is not important who we are or where we come from, only that we are inhabitants of the same universe." For the next 45 minutes, this strange, disembodied voice spoke through Raphael's radio. It delivered a chilling monologue, a warning to all of humanity. It spoke of how humans were the only intelligent species in the known universe that waged war on itself, and that our species was on a path to self-annihilation through nuclear holocaust. Then, at exactly 11:30 a.m., the robotic voice stopped mid-sentence. Instantly, it was replaced by Raphael's own voice, high-pitched with panic, screaming, "Oh, what's going on? I think I fell asleep at the wheel." No one could explain what happened. Investigators examined his plane and found it in perfect working order. The fuel tank really was 3/4 full. Rafael Perez had no memory of the event and was cleared of any wrongdoing. Faced with an incident that defied all logic and physics, the Mexican government did the only thing it could. They buried the story. The official records, the transcripts, and the audio recordings were sealed and hidden away in an obscure library, where they remain to this day, accessible only by formal written request. So what really happened to Rafael Perez in the skies over Mexico? Skeptics might suggest he suffered a complex psychotic episode, a vivid hallucination brought on by the stress of his first solo flight. But that theory crumbles when faced with the hard, physical evidence. How do you explain the impossible physics of the flight? The time, the distance, the fuel, none of it adds up. And what about the audio recording of that strange robotic voice, a recording witnessed by a government air traffic controller? The other possibility, the one that is far more unsettling, is that the voice was telling the truth. That for 45 minutes, Rafael Perez's body was used as a conduit, a human microphone for an intelligence not of this world. In an era where governments are now openly admitting to the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, a story like this, from 1976, suddenly feels chillingly relevant. It speaks to a certain human arrogance, the belief that if extraterrestrial life existed, we would surely be able to recognize it. But as one famous astrophysicist once posed, when you walk down the street and see an ant, do you stop to communicate with it? What makes us so sure that to a being of higher intelligence, we are anything more than ants? They could be all around us, operating on a level of existence we are simply too primitive to perceive. And there we go. Another memory back from the dark. Don't go too far. I've got more mysteries itching to be told. What do you think happened to Rafael Perez up there in the clouds? Was it a message from the stars or a storm within his own mind? Let me know your theories in the comments below.